Oh, hey, America, how are you? Welcome to the weekend. Sorry for the late start. Actually, it was an early start, just a late finish. I won't bore you with all the details that delayed our story time together today, but suffice it to say, that's all behind me now. I have a story for you right here. It's a David and Goliath story, and I look forward to reading it momentarily. But first, I have to explain how it is that the Mike Rowe logo has finally wound up on the side of a pen. Big day for Mike Rowe. This is the RevMark marker. And as long as we're talking about David and Goliath, let me just preface my story with another story. I'll make it brief. John Shea. John Shea, in 1924, he's a guy living in Manhattan, and he's making the tips to fountain pens. Somebody had to do that, I suppose, and John was doing it. Right there in Manhattan, down on Prince and Lafayette Street, working away before the Depression, making fountain pen tips. He has a son named Warren. Warren picks up where the old man leaves off and then goes off to learn how to fly planes during the Second World War, and then comes back and takes stock of the writing implement situation, looks over the topography and the future of writing implements, and concludes the fountain pen, while a delightful homage to form, is not exactly the epitome of function. So ballpoint pens, that's where it's at. So Warren gets one of those plastic injection mold machines and puts it in his garage, and he starts making ballpoint pens. And the whole operation moves over to New Jersey. And then Warren has a son named Hap. Maybe short for Happy? I don't know. It's a heck of a thing to name your kid after an emotion, because it's impossible to go through your life sad if you're happy, right? Anyway, Warren Jr., or Hap, if you will, picks up where his dad leaves off, and they start making pens. The Pen Company of America is born, and so too is Colleen, and then Matt, and Greg. Forgive me if I got the order wrong, but I just got off the phone with Greg, who reached out and said, "Mike, we love what you're doing at Mike Rowe, and my family's been making pens for generations, and what can we do to help?" And I said, "Well, you can put Mike Rowe on the side of a pen. That'd be cool." He said, "Oh, that's the least we can do. We'll put it on the side of a RevMark." I said, "What's a RevMark?" He said, "Mike, the RevMark is the writing implement that is simply going to change the future of markers." I said, "Greg, do tell. Surely you must be gilding the lily just a tad." And he said, No, I'm not. If you talk to construction workers, as surely you must." And I said, "Yes, surely I have." And he said, "Well, what do they tell you primarily is their first and leading concern vis-a-vis markers?" And I said, "Well, we haven't talked about it in depth, but if I reflect upon the many occasions I've had to chat with many of the independent contractors who do the kinds of construction jobs that you may have seen on a program called Dirty Jobs, I can tell you without exception, the primary complaint among the aforementioned contractors is the slow and inevitable degradation of the nib. The nib is what you call the tip. And if you look at, say, a Sharpie, for instance, or a magic marker, you'll see a difference in the nib. This thing is an industrial strength nib. It's a fine point, but it allows you to write on things like brick and concrete and sheetrock and wood and all the various building materials that a construction worker might find him or herself writing upon in the course of their day. So you've got yourself an industrial strength marker called a RevMark, and now it's got Mike Rowe on the side. But wait, there's more. A construction worker called the Pen Company of America and got Craig on the phone and said, "Greg, I got an idea for a better cap." He said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, what would happen if we just inverted the attachment so a contractor could put the thing on his belt and then quickly draw the marker like it was a holster and then do the thing? That way he'd never lose the cap." And I said, "Well, Greg, has this been a problem in the industry?" And Greg said, "Oh, it's a huge problem. Caps becoming decoupled from the markers." It's extraordinary to me the way business works in this country, where a contractor can call the Pen Company of America with a better idea for a cap. And the Pen Company of America can meanwhile and contemporaneously be developing a better idea for an industrial strength marker. And suddenly the patented cap comes together with the marker, and then a guy named Greg reaches out on behalf of his grandfather, great-grandfather, dad, and two younger siblings to say, "We ought to do something to help Mike Rowe close the skills gap." And the next thing you know, I'm taking my iPhone and spinning it around and showing you this, the RevMark Quick Draw Marker. tied into Mike Rowe Works now for the month of September. 10% of every RevMark purchased when you enter Mike 10 comes back to the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, and you save an additional 10% on anything you buy off the website. You can't make it up. What's that have to do with David and Goliath? Well, this is the story that's all about David and Goliath. But if you think about it, I mean, I think Sharpie's out there as the Goliath, and these guys, Greg and his family, they're making pens in New Jersey to this day. They're making markers right there in New Jersey. RevMarkUSA.com/MRW. Get one, would you? Shall we? Reed was a little guy with no plan, no strategy, and no real idea of what to do with his life. So uncertain was Reed about the trajectory of his own career, he joined the Army, as well as the Peace Corps, a monument to vocational schizophrenia if there ever was one. John, on the other hand, was a big guy who knew right from the start exactly where he was headed. Like his dad, a milkman in Brooklyn, John worked hard and always put the customer first. He started at a 7-Eleven stocking shelves. Soon after that, he was running the store. And by the time he was 25, John was managing dozens of 7-Elevens. After that, he went on to run the Circle K organization, and then John became the CEO of Taco Bell. John's rise to the top was as fast as the food he served, and when he transitioned into the entertainment business, he took all that experience with him. Meanwhile, little Reed returned from the Peace Corps, determined to do something big. In Silicon Valley, he was surrounded by all sorts of new technologies and bold innovations, but it was a very old idea that got Reed's attention. An idea from 1791, first laid out in the U.S. Constitution. What if the little guy could use the U.S. Postal Service to compete directly with the biggest guys in the business? Reed got busy, and before long found himself in direct competition with Big John. It's not a new story. Little guys and big guys have been squaring off ever since David and Goliath came face to face in the Valley of Elah. But here in modern times, most epic confrontations almost never involve spears and slingshots. They involve shareholders and stock valuations and play out on battlefields of burnished mahogany that glow under the cold buzz of fluorescent lights. It was there, in a corporate conference room as forgettable as it was homogeneous, that Reed and John first came together for a friendly chat about the future. Reed's little company was gaining customers and getting some very good press, and Reed thought maybe John, being a big guy, might want to buy him, making Reed a big guy too. But the conversation was short. In truth, Reed's little company was actually losing money, and Big John knew that a world obsessed with speed and customer service would have little patience for an idea that relied upon the stodgy old post office. So, Big John laughed little Reed right out of the conference room, politely, and wished him every success. Big John and little Reed would meet a few more times, and each time John would chuckle at the sheer audacity of Reed's proposition. You see, Reed was trying to get John to buy a company that lost money and relied entirely on an 18th century delivery system for $50 million. You can understand why Big John might chuckle at such a suggestion. On the other hand, $50 million today is 0.2% of Reed Hastings' little company, a little company called Netflix. As for John Antiocho's big company, well, it took a while, but after 14 years of competing with the little guy, the giant finally fell. And the last of those blue and yellow signs, once ubiquitous across America, flickered and faded away at Blockbuster Video, proving once again that little guys don't always stay that way, and the customer is still the biggest boss of all. Anyway, that's the way I heard it. All right, then. There's your story for a Saturday. 2 stories. Don't forget to get yourself a Mike Rowe Works RevMark marker. And you do that where? Well, I know I told you once, but I read somewhere it's always good to repeat these things. You go to You go to revmarkusa.com/MRW. Oh, and you do one other thing. You get out there and enjoy what's left of the weekend. See you. Bye.